to mute yourself when you're not speaking, and also if you wish, if you do not wish to be identified, there's an opportunity for you now to rename yourself. But also, people may not know who you are unless you engage on a chat box or you ask any questions. But if you want to change your name, feel free to do so right now. Also to explain that there are two facilities at this meeting, two boxes. One of them is a chat box where you can send us your comments or you tell us where you're from. And another function, which is a Q&A function. And this is, for the first session, we're inviting journalists, the press who are attending the event to send us questions. And at the end of the event, we're asking all the attendees to submit their questions using this particular facility. I also would like to remind everyone, if you're tweeting, there are the two main hashtags. The first one is status now for all, and the second hashtag is health and safety for all. So welcome again. And without further ado, I'd like to invite the Labour MP for Leicester East, Claudia Webb, who proposed the EDM for us to tell us why she supported the campaign. Over to you, Claudia. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much. And I would just like to thank everyone who has joined us as well today, and for Status Now Network for launching this hugely important initiative. And it's a pleasure to actually speak at this crucial event. The coronavirus pandemic has caused widespread suffering for too many individuals and communities across the UK. We do not yet know the full impact of the unprecedented economic disruption caused by the virus. With widespread job losses, it is certain that it will have exacerbated the hardship caused by a decade of austerity. You know, whilst the government's financial support for businesses and employees has been far from perfect, many of those affected have been able to claim at least some modicum of support to cope with this crisis. Yet this opportunity has not been afforded to some of the most vulnerable people in the UK. And currently there are an unknown number of persons who are not citizens, who do not have leave to remain in this country. For a demographic that already faces uncommonly difficult challenges in their daily life, this pandemic has only deepened fears over how to maintain an income, remain healthy, or even stay alive. There are an estimated 1 million undocumented workers who lack any entitlement to support from the state. That is incredible. And these are people who are therefore entirely without funds to feed, clothe, and house themselves and their families. Many undocumented people are destitute and living in the shadows, fearful of what will happen to them if they identify themselves. They cannot access healthcare, emergency shelter, food, nor report or seek protection from domestic violence, rape, exploitation, or other awful abuses. In nearly all cases, undocumented people are not criminals, but simply those who have fallen through the cracks of the government's callous, hostile environment policies. Under this government, we've seen citizenship rights deliberately obscured, and deportation and removal targets have taken precedence. Yet they have made no effort to end the hostile environment policies, which were found to be institutionally racist by the official inquiry into the Windrush scandal. For people forced to endure this level of precarity, it is impossible to comply with government guidance on self-isolation and social distancing. And I believe that everyone has the right to be in an environment where they can follow the public health directives necessary to limit viral transmission. Therefore, it's imperative and in the best interest of everyone in our country, that the basic needs of all those who are living in our country are met, especially given the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on African, on Asian and minority ethnic communities. But you know, the tragic irony is that the many undocumented people who are living in constant fear of the British state work in frontline services that the government have been at pains to praise during this crisis. The coronavirus crisis has shown that the people who really matter, who really keep our society ticking, are not billionaires, and they're not the super rich, but nurses, carers, cleaners, checkout attendants, and many more essential frontline workers. We must ensure that all frontline workers, regardless of their immigration status, are valued and protected as we rebuild our economy and society. And that's why this is the importance of this campaign. The mistreatment of undocumented migrants reveals the fundamental hypocrisy of this government. It doesn't matter how many cabinet ministers applaud NHS staff and frontline workers in front of television cameras on Thursday nights if they then do not ensure their safety, their safe residency in the UK. It's hypocrisy at best, and it's vital. Therefore, we repay the extraordinary contribution of frontline workers with a permanent extension of migrant rights. That means an end to the hostile environment, shutting detention centres and granting indefinite leave to remain for everyone living in the UK. You know, as the Member of Parliament for Leicester East, it's been appalling that the exploited labour of residents of my constituency is helping to finance such extravagant corporate salaries. This demonstrates the stark inequality that exists in our society, and is actually proof that the obscene wealth of the billionaires is actually built on the exploitation of the working class, and that includes migrant workers. It is true, billionaires exist because the working class, including migrants, are exploited. After this crisis, I would hope that Leicester can no longer be known as the sweatshop of Europe, and we must do everything possible to end this exploitation now. At a time when hate crime has more than doubled since 2013, with over 100,000 offences in 2018, it has never been more important for the dehumanisation of migrants to end. That means repealing the 2014 Immigration Act, reversing the hostile environment and shutting those detention centres. It also means that it is essential for the government to take immediate action to ensure that leave to remain is granted to everyone in the UK, irrespective of their nationality or immigration status, so that they can access the healthcare, food and housing that is necessary. And as lockdown measures are prematurely relaxed by this reckless government, it is also crucial that everyone in our society can adhere to advice on social distancing, ensure the health of themselves and their families, and help to protect the well-being of all people in the UK. So I want to congratulate organisations like the Bakers, Food and Allied Workers Union, the Status Now Network and the civil rights groups who have called for the British and Irish governments to deliver justice to all residents. Together we can build a society in which everyone is valued, no matter their country of birth. And I would want to hope that when this crisis is over and we can move as we should, that we stand in solidarity, not just now, but in the future, with the people of Leicester East and Leicester as a whole who are being exploited, and that we protect them solidly from herein and onwards, and that we never let this this open secret continue, and that migrant communities are exploited, that must end, and that we all move together so that their voices can indeed be heard. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much, Claudia. Thank you for all your support and all your passion as well. And thank you for proposing the EDM, which now I think there are over 40 MPs have signed it. So thank you so much. And I know that you are going to stay with us, hopefully answer some questions later on. So thank you again. We were hoping to show now a statement from one of the MPs, SNP MPs. As you know, a number of SNPs have signed our petition, the EDM, and supported the campaign. But due to technical problems, we are not able to show it, I'm afraid, at this minute, but it will be uploaded to the website. So hopefully you can watch it later. So apologies for that. Next, we will be hearing by video from Professor Anis Ismail, who's a professor of public health, telling us why it's important that everyone needs to access healthcare and support. So
difficult for them, so that they will try and leave this country. And I'm a professor of general practice at the University of Manchester. I also work as a GP in inner city Manchester. And I wanted to say a few words about why I'm supporting Status Now. As a general practitioner, and particularly during the COVID pandemic, I have become really worried about some of my patients who are asylum seekers and are currently under the status of no recourse to public funds. This is a really frightening thing for them, I think. I've always worried about this group of my patients even before the pandemic, because when you have no recourse to public funds, you have no access to housing. You get £5.65 a day, and that's got to last for everything that you need, your travel, your food. And it's a horrible existence that people live. It makes them vulnerable to exploitation. And I know many who end up working almost as slave labor in some of the places around Manchester because they're so desperate for money. And officially they aren't allowed to work, and so this is all done illegally and under the counter. And during the pandemic, it's become very clear that this is an extremely vulnerable group, probably the most vulnerable group of all. And it's almost as an insult that the government increased the allowance for this group by 26 pence a day. Now, if you're on about £5.65 a day, that's 74% below the poverty line that the government itself sets. So think about it. You escape a country because of war, because you've been imprisoned falsely, because you might have faced torture, and you end up in this country, and you are not believed, your claims take years, and whilst you're waiting, your claim is initially rejected, and then you appeal, and you remain in the system. And whilst that happens, you are a failed asylum seeker, and that's when this category gets put on you. And we have been told during the pandemic that we have to do simple things like wash hands, sanitize hands, and so on. £5.65, where do you even buy a bottle of sanitizer? And I worry about this because this is probably the most vulnerable group in society. And it represents a public health hazard, for example. If they got COVID, just imagine, how are they going to be able to isolate themselves? How are they going to seek help? They worry about seeking health at the best of times. And really now, they would worry even more. And they worry about accessing healthcare because they worry that they might be reported to the Home Office or something like that. So it's really worrying. If we're going to control this pandemic, if we're going to actually try and do something about stopping the spread of this pandemic, we have to look at sections of society who are most vulnerable and who may be not only vulnerable because if they get it, they will have very severe consequences, but because also they represent a public health problem in the sense that it might be very difficult for them to isolate and not spread the virus unwittingly. And I just think that if we're going to control this virus, if we're going to truly have a public health approach to it, we have to look at the most vulnerable section of society. And this group, the failed asylum seekers who currently have no recourse to public funds, are really a group of people who just pass under our radar. I was initially shocked when I found out that we actually have a group of people where we purposely try and make life so difficult for them so that they will try and leave this country. I just think that's cruel in the extreme. And I just feel that what Status Now is doing to try and actually, firstly, make people aware of the terrible state people like this are in is really important, because just humanity says that we have to do more. And particularly at times like this, when we recognize how difficult it is for so many people, there is a group of people who have no access to anything. And I think as human beings, as people who care, we really have to try and do something to help them. So I hope you support this campaign, and I hope you realize that it's really important that this group of very vulnerable people should be helped so that they can get leave to remain, get proper access to funds, and actually get a standard of living which will actually prevent them catching the infection and also spreading it. So I hope you support this campaign. Thank you.
Nasek, you're mute.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So I was saying we're really grateful to Professor Anis for sending us this statement and explaining to us and to everyone with us today why it's important that people do have a status, have access to support so they can ensure they are safe, and for reminding everyone, by this situation and the really difficult situation that many undocumented migrants are facing in UK, and many of the signatures of this campaign, we meet those people who work with them on a daily basis, including my organization, Migrant Voice. So thank you for that. I've noticed that there are no questions in the Q&A box, so I would like to encourage you to please post your questions there. I can see some chatting in the chat box, which is great. But if you have a question, you still have time. So please do write your question there so we can pick it up shortly. But now I would like to move to testimonies so for us to hear from people who have experienced living as undocumented person in the UK. What's the experience like, and why do they think it's important? Why do they want status now? But also with some family members, for people who have family members who are undocumented, tell us, how being undocumented doesn't only affect you, but also affects the wider society and your family as well. I'd like to invite to start addressing us Vitalis to tell us again a little bit about his experience and why he thinks it's really important that we do get status now. Vitalis, over to you.
Unmute Vitalis.
Hello, thank you for having me on this show, and greetings to everyone who is watching us today. I would like to start by saying I wish and I really pray that status is granted to all asylum seekers, because a lot has happened, and being an asylum seeker in the UK, I've been through a lot of things that I often term this process the worst thing that ever happened to my life. First of all, when I claimed asylum, I realized that I was given an accommodation, and in that in living in the accommodation, I was given finances, which was about £37.75 a week. And if you split that money, you will see that you'll be left with about £5 a day, which having £5 a day, I think is really pathetic, because the bus fare in the country actually is already more than the £5 you have in your hand, and you need to use that money for food, sanitation, and a lot of other things that you need. Given that situation, I was forced to always be late for my appointments, and most of the time I had to trek in the rain or during winter or in the cold or whatever situation, just to preserve the money and use it for the most pressing needs that I need to have. So it was really something that I can't manage with £5. In some other instances, we are given accommodations, and some of the asylum seekers are being detained, something which I cannot speak much of that because I haven't gone through the process, but I know those who are being detained they are completely cut off from the society and they can't access their family or lawyers or get information that may help them. All this, they put us in a state of panic. And living in this accommodation, it was some sort of, it built a lot of fear in my mind because you don't know what may happen to you and you don't know who is coming to that accommodation to visit you and what they are coming to do to you. So all the time you were living your life in complete fear. And when in the accommodation, you notice most of the time we have constant light failures. The heating was a problem. It was not working. Some of the accommodation have vermin, which are very disturbing. And then the fire and safety regulation is not really adequate. So we had a lot of difficulties living in those accommodations. The worst part of it is when you go through this asylum process and you are termed a failed asylum seeker, that's when you really realize the reality of these things. Because when I was in an accommodation and my claim was refused, they gave me a notice to leave the accommodation and I was still struggling where I can get people or move my things for shelter. Within time, the duration elapsed. And by the time I was coming back home, I only realized that people has come into the home, remove my stuff and throw them, and then change the locks for the door. So I couldn't access the room again. It was really frustrating for me and I just had to carry my stuff. And then after 2 or 3 days, I plead with somebody to come and get them and keep them for safety. Going through that, it was really frustrating for me. And I don't wish ever seeking or begging the government for another accommodation because we were supposed to be allowed our rights. They know better that we don't have the resources and we don't have where to go, where in such a situation, we can put our things together and then move out of the home peacefully. It becomes so frustrating. And when that happened to me, I just said, this is really crazy. I had to now look for friends and I started sofa surfing with them. And before even sofa surfing with a friend, I had to be going around in Manchester, Piccadilly. Sometimes I sleep at the train station. And then finally I got somewhere that I started sleeping on somebody's sofa. It is so sad going through this process and then people treating you as if you are not human beings. We all have the right to live and the right to be respected. And when we come to a country that we are claiming asylum, we are running from our country because of war. Most of the things that have pushed us to come out from that country. And coming to the UK to claim asylum, it is our due right that we should be treated as many other citizens in this country. I believe a majority of the asylum seekers, who we are intellectuals, and we can contribute in building this country and even helping those who are far below us, because together as a family, we can all pull them up and we will make Britain a great nation. So I believe in this campaign that granting status to all of us, we have individual roles to play and we shall make the country brilliant. Because I will take, for example, just a few times that I managed to get an accommodation where I am, I've been participating at the church, and the grass area that was there, the bush that surrounded the church, I've transformed that area into a nice scenario that people now always come around to take pictures and they are very happy with the great work that I've done in that area. It's something that I've given them life and they are all happy about it. And I think we can do more if we are allowed the possibility to be as any UK citizen. We would do more, far more better than some of the people who are living in this country. And I think this plot is really important for us asylum seekers. Thank you very much. Hope this mission succeeds.
Thank you so much, Vitalis, for sharing this with us and for putting the case why undocumented migrants should have a status now. And also, just to explain, for me, I get upset when I hear the word failed asylum seekers. Asylum seekers are not failed people. They are failed by the system. And thank you for putting a clear picture of how people are treated in the UK at the moment in this day and age, and it shouldn't be like this. So thank you so much for sharing this with us. Can I ask you to mute yourself now? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And can I now invite Rose also to share with us, to tell us why it's really important that now the government does grant status for undocumented migrants. Rose, over to you.
Yeah, I think they should, because living in this condition is not really one of the best conditions. Nobody should live like this, because I live in horrible situations where you live in overcrowded houses, have to share bathrooms with a lot of people. Not really nice, especially in the lockdown. I know a lot of people that have been through a lot, like living in crowded accommodation. You can't go out, you know, it's not nice. And you can't access medical help if you're ill. Can't go to the doctors because you're scared that if you go, they might call immigration on you and they might just throw you out of the country. So nobody wants that. So I think status now is a good thing, that everybody should be free to have access to the basic things in life, so you can survive. So that's how I see it.
Yeah, thank you so much for this, Rose. Thank you. Can I now invite Anna? Anna, are you with us? Please, over to you, Anna.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me to speak. I would like to thank you to the MPs and other organizations who are here today supporting the undocumented people. In July 2017, my Arab employer brought me to London with their entire family as their only domestic worker. I was doing all household work while looking after the 8 children. I was working very hard as their family slave, but I could not bear the maltreatment. I was fed stale food and leftover food. I don't have my own room. I was sleeping on the cold room. This family verbally abused me, telling that I am stupid, I don't have mind, I am animal. I'm not treated like a human being. One time, my female employer took my phone because she found out that I reported them to my agency. I was told not to make any communication to anyone outside the house. They never paid me my exact salary, so I don't have enough money to send for my 4 children in the Philippines. When my female employer started to physically abuse me, I decided to run away to escape the abuse. I was so desperate because my passport, they kept my passport. But still, I decided to fight back against the abuse. The Filipino Domestic Workers Association and the Kanlungan Filipino Consortium was supported me. Then I was referred to National Referral Mechanism as a person, a victim of human trafficking. And I got my positive ground. While I'm waiting for the decision of the Home Office in my case, I volunteer in different community, different charity like Oxfam. I'm helping other vulnerable people who are also undocumented like me. In time of height of COVID-19, I am one of the main volunteer of Kanlungan delivering food, medicine, and other basic needs of vulnerable people. I also help look after the undocumented who is terminally ill with cancer. She has no money to go back home for her family before she dies. It has been more than 2 years now, and still I'm undocumented. Over the years, Kanlungan Filipino Consortium campaigning to regularize undocumented people. And I'm supporting this campaign because I believe that we are all deserve to have equal rights, to live with dignity, to be able to support our family and other people. My only wish is to live a normal life like others. And now I urge all undocumented people to be strong, to join us, to fight for the status now. Thank you, and mabuhay tayong lahat.
Thank you so much, Anna. Thank you for sharing all this with us. Absolutely, we should be equal and we should all be able to live in dignity and respect. So thank you for sharing this with us and for supporting the campaign. Thank you. Can I now invite Shaista to tell us about what's it like to be living with the undocumented family members and why she supported the campaign? Shaista, over to you.
Hi, thank you, Nazik, and thank you, and hello, everyone. I'm Shaista and I'm a member of RAPA. Now, my family includes undocumented people, and this makes me feel frustrated, sometimes embarrassed as well, and guilty that only some of my family members have status and only some of them can work, study, or travel. And now within my family, there's unequal access to services like to education and to medical care. And the fact that some of us are British citizens who were born in the UK, this doesn't give automatic rights to or provide a pathway to legal status for the rest of my family. And this is very worrying. Now, during lockdown, some of my family members did get unwell, but they were too scared to visit the GP. In case they had coronavirus symptoms, they thought they might be reported to the authorities or be detained because of not having any status in the UK. And the threat of these actions has in the long run impacted not only mine, but my siblings' health and development. I suffer from mental health problems like depression and anxiety, and this psychological distress would only increase if any of my family members were deported or even detained. It has a huge impact on all of us. And with status now, we can all equally participate as a family in ensuring status for all, irrespective of anyone's nationality, color, or background. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shaista, for sharing this with us. Thank you, and for supporting the campaign. So thank you to all the migrants who shared their experience with us and who explained very clearly to us why the government should give status to all undocumented migrants, especially during this pandemic, but also at other times, of course. So I guess now it's over to look at your questions. I guess we have a question from, first question from Levan Tozashvili. You can ask a question. The question is for the MP, for Claudia. Over to you, Levan, to ask a question. Very briefly, please.
Okay, am I on? Hello?
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Over to you. Yes, please
Okay,
do ask
great.
your question,
Okay.
but be brief. Thank you.
Fine. Okay, so yeah, my question was, what was the likelihood about to this put forward to the in the parliament when last time the Rupa the member of parliament did to prime minister, and since then nobody has answered that in the Commons. So what's the likelihood about it being answered again? Thanks.
Claudia, would you like to answer that question, please?
Yeah, sorry, just unmuting. I mean, I think that what we're trying to do with the early day motion is try to build support across the political divide and try to get as many parliamentarians from both sides of the House, all sides of the House, really to support this sensible motion, really. And, we've seen and heard today the impact of what it means to be undocumented in this during this crisis.
Oh, sorry. I hope we're not losing Claudia. We can't hear you, Claudia. So you might have lost connection with Claudia. Okay. Maybe we can go to the second question, and we'll get back to Claudia as soon as we have as soon as we have her back. So the next question from Elmira to any of the panelists. So Elmira, do you want to ask your question, or is it about how to force this issue on the government to bring about change?
Hi.
Hello, yes.
How can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Do you want to ask a question quickly? Hopefully we'll have Claudia back with us. She might have problems with the internet.
Because there are lots of petitions going on, and even spearheaded by different organizations and also barristers and solicitors. There are lots of petitions, but this government or the MP's response is very negative, and they are saying that there are already solutions for this. There are already rules and regulations exist. But then how can force this government to respond positively? And because there are lots of they all exhausted lots of forms of petitions, appeals, but to no avail. And I think the government is just using the illegal immigrants to be able to secure, or to be able to win in the last elections, especially Prime Minister Boris Johnson. So what else can we do to really force the government to respond, to this appeal and petitions?
Yeah. Thank you, Elmira. Thank you so much. I think we have you back, Claudia. Sorry, we lost you for a minute. You were answered the earlier question, and you have a second question now, which is how can we push the government to bring about change, to respond to our campaign? So over to you again.
Well, look, we've just got to keep up the pressure. Change does not come without demand. And if we build this movement, the Status Now network, build it with not just the parliamentarians, but build it with civil society as well. But those that are working on the grassroots, in the grassroots of our communities up and down this country, build it with our unions as well, the Bakers Union and others, that we can really, in a sense, try to bring about the change that we want to see, because nothing will come without the demand that we put and the pressure that we put. This is clearly a humanitarian situation that we are trying to push here, and it's important that every single member of parliament seeks to support this motion that we're trying to put. It's also important that we, at every stage of this crisis, that we raise our voices in parliament. So I'm hoping that we move beyond the early day motion, that we also put pressure in every constituency up and down this country, we put pressure on parliamentarians to do the right thing, to push for this change to happen. And in a sense, we cannot let it go that we do not know in this country the scale and extent of undocumented migrants. So we also have to push the government to understand what is happening and what is going on, to understand the numbers involved, and to understand it is their policies that have driven people into this status in the first place. It is not right that people should be here for almost 20 years and still be classified as migrants. It is not right that people are contributing to our society as, you know, on the front line of life really, and delivering and saving lives, and are not equally respected. Therefore, it's important that we all unite together and build this movement, build status in our network, build it into a national movement with the support of our unions and civil society as well as parliamentarians. So let's keep this fight up, because we can show that with our demands, with our movement, with our unity, that we can bring about change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Claudia. Thank you. I guess we have time for one last question. And please remember, there's another Q&A session towards the end of this event. So keep your questions coming. But maybe can I invite Faith very briefly to ask the question that they have. Faith, over to you. Make it brief, please. Thank you. Faith, I think you need to unmute yourself. We can't hear you. You're on mute still. Can you unmute yourself so we can hear you? Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Okay, go ahead. Please ask your question and make it brief. Thank you, Faith. Thank you.
Not actually a question. I'm just here to say thank you for the fight that you're doing for all of us. That's all that I wanted to say. We feel that you really fighting for us. And when things get so tough, we know that we can always rely on you and Salman and all the other organizations. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Faith. Okay, so I guess this is maybe the end of the first part of our event. We're trying to finish by 6 o'clock today. I'm really delighted now to move to our first cultural activity or event. We'll be watching a short film, a performance by Filipino chanter, Belsilda. Please enjoy.
sa payagmakan Diyos sa po bendisyon ni Paino kani kami na anak no kung gayam ay ugayam galayaman ugayam galayaman.
Thank you. Thank you. Now I'd like to invite Lorraine Ponella from the Coventry Asylum Refugee Action Group to update us on the campaign work so far and on the next stage for the campaign. Lorraine, over to you.
Thank you, Nazek. So what we have done so far and why. I'll start by quoting Martin Luther King, who said, "Freedom must be fought for, protected, and handed on for children to do the same." Because of our prior knowledge and experience of what it's like trying to live in the UK without status, we knew as soon as COVID-19 lockdown was announced in mid-March that people without status were going to be immediately at a significant disadvantage for lots of reasons, including having barely enough money to eat, never mind make ourselves or keep ourselves healthy, and therefore less likely to become sick, being without a home or living in very overcrowded accommodation and therefore not being able to self-isolate if one of us gets sick, or protect ourselves if someone else where we live with gets sick, not being able to access a doctor or a hospital in case we get reported because of our status and then get detained and deported. Working a job that's under the radar and therefore doesn't offer any protection whatsoever in terms of a wage or being furloughed during lockdown or basic health and safety. Knowing this, the only way that we could see for us to protect ourselves, each other, and everyone around us was to offer a way for the state to communicate with us, the undocumented people, and our networks of allies directly. We put out the call for status now. We wrote to the Prime Minister of the UK and the Republic of Ireland because we understood that we too are an essential part of creating a public health response to COVID-19 that actually does everything necessary to both stop people from becoming infected with the virus and stop people from passing it on. So on March 27th of this year, we sent an open letter, a combination of people without status and our allies. Prior to this, we have always been in the shadows, never really talking about or acknowledged as existing in the society, living lives in the shadows without any real rights and open to being exploited and oppressed because of not having those rights. When we created this call for status now, we understood that we have to be visible in a way that makes it possible for us to be a part of creating the future solution. How this land is going to move forward in the ways that make it possible for every member of its population to be healthy and safe and be able to look after each other. In future, we want this network to develop with direct and increasing participation, shaping and decision-making by people with lived experience of what it's like to live in the UK without status, alongside with people with that status. We want this network to continue to grow sustainably, describing and explaining why it is in the interest of everyone who is currently living in the UK for those of us without status to have equal access to healthcare, housing, and food. So who are we? Many of us are qualified to work in essential services, and many of us can do and actually do work. As we have heard already during this launch, several of us have died already during the pandemic, working as carers, or others too frightened to seek the medical help that we needed for fear of being imprisoned or deported. Many of us are Commonwealth citizens and are here directly because of the UK foreign policy, both in the past and up to the present day, because people do and continue to come to the UK, some for asylum, some to be with their families, some seeking a life without war and famine, and environmental destruction that has happened in their own lands at the hands of the aggressive invaders or multinational corporations. People have moved here to survive, and what's wrong with that? I myself am here, denied the right to work legally, but helping others all the time throughout the COVID crisis, supporting people and offering information, advice, and food as part of the networks within the community here where I live in Coventry in the West Midlands. I know that I'm part of the solution alongside everyone else who is here today to be part of this launch. If you are undocumented or you know of people who are, please join us, connect up to the network by emailing us at info@statusnowforall.org. You can also find this email address on our website, statusnowforall.org. We hope to carry on organizing together and make it possible for people to connect up with one another safely inside the regions where they are, so please do get in touch. I started by a quote and I'll end by a quote by Lila Watson, who said, "If you have come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together." Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lorraine. Absolutely. Let us work together. I'd like now again to stop for a very short cultural activity, but just to warn you that this one starts with a siren, is a poem read by Ambrose Misiyiwa. It does start by siren, so it's not a problem. There's no problem with the device if you're hearing that. Before we do that video, we started the poem, just to want everyone to mute yourself.
Shall we blame Martians for everything that is wrong with the world? Shall we scan every building, every meeting, living, breathing space for signs of Martians? Shall we prod Earthlings, ask them to be on guard, and report, round up, or bash any Martians sighted or imagined? Shall we bring out the spaceships and start patrolling the streets? Shall we feed PA systems to the spaceships and play messages on a loop telling Martians to go home, that if they do not leave voluntarily, we will come after them, we will come for them and possibly remove them? Shall we round up all Martians, put them in detention centers, put them on the next spaceship to Mars? Shall we gas them? Shall we nuke them?
Thank you, very powerful words here. Now I'd like us to move to a couple of guests to hear about the perspective from some of our campaign signatories. I first would like to invite Diane Skelton from ATD Fourth World to tell us her own perspective, or her organization's perspective on the campaign. Thank you. Diane, over to you. Thank you.
Good afternoon. ATD Fourth World is a human rights organization. We work against poverty, and we're led by the lived experience of people in poverty. We see the well-being of society as a whole. We see the denial of human rights of any one individual as something doing harm to every one of us. In our view, it's people who've experienced the denial of their own dignity who lead the way in helping our whole society to understand better what kind of a world we want to shape. One of those people with lived experience of poverty was a woman named Maureen Roberts. She died this past January. Her whole life, she struggled against poverty and struggled with physical disability. She was also a real leader of ATD Fourth World. She was part of our national coordination team for the last 6 years of her life. She was deeply concerned about the human rights of people who are facing obstacles of an inhumane immigration system. And so now I would like to read to you some of her words on this subject. I'm going to share my screen so you can see her photograph. In 2002, giving a speech to the Fabian Society think tank, Maureen said, "Certain actions taken by our government actually create poverty for some. I'm thinking of the plight of asylum seekers who are expected to live on 70% of income support, who are placed in accommodations that no one else wants, or in prisons, who are forced to endure the indignity of presenting vouchers at specific shops. This is a source of shame to us all. If this is being done in my name, I say here and now, no more. I have a very low income, but I would gladly give up a little of it to end this right now." Maureen was also deeply concerned about ways that public discourse often pit people against one another and sow seeds of division, fomenting racism. In 2005, she spoke about this at a seminar that was organized by Oxfam and the Directory of Social Change. Maureen said, "Poverty in the UK is not something that we should even be discussing in this day and age. It's shameful that it exists, but it does. No one deserves to be living in poverty, and yet we see again the separation of people into deserving and undeserving, creating a division of public opinion when deciding who should be given support and who not. That division makes it easier to force groups of people experiencing poverty to compete for resources. Someone I know very well says the government should put money into kids above foreigners or drunks or druggies. I don't want my taxes to go to people like them." The woman who said that is well respected on our estate. Her views on the poor, as awful as they sound, are not untypical of comments I hear in many places. When you mention asylum seekers, replies often start, "I'm not a racist, but..." The same people who usually speak negatively about people in poverty are suddenly talking about, "Let's give to our own poor first." It's not fair that the poor are blamed for their poverty, and so it is their problem, not a social problem that's the responsibility of all of us. Stigmatizing people living in poverty creates a divided society. We have to create a society that seeks solutions to poverty that are based on the knowledge and experience of people who live in poverty. We must work together to eradicate poverty, not for the sake of the poor, but for all our sakes, because the existence of poverty damages us all and lessens us as human beings. Remembering Maureen's words, ATD Fourth World is very proud to be part of the Status Now for All campaign. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Diane. Thank you. And yes, very powerful word from Maureen Roberts. I am honored to have met Maureen a few years ago when we had a workshop together. We brought asylum seekers to ATD Fourth World and undocumented migrants to speak, to have a discussion together about poverty. And she was there, and herself and her colleagues were shocked to hear the experiences of undocumented migrants and asylum seekers, how they're treated by the system. And they were all brilliant and so supportive. So, I mean, thank you for that. Thank you. I would like now to invite Munya from Regularized also to tell us his perspective on the campaign and why they're supporting the campaign. Munya, over to you.
Yes, hello. Good afternoon and good evening, everyone. Firstly, I would just like to thank everyone who's gathered here today for the Status Now for All campaign and Status Now Network launch. I'm very touched by the contributions I've heard and seen so far. It is a great pleasure to see so many people from various walks of life supporting this important cause, and it is an honor to be a part of this campaign and network. Members of Parliament, trade unions, community groups and organizations, fellow signatories, undocumented migrants and all migrants with insecure status, supporters, artists, journalists, friends, families, fellow humans. I am from the migrant-founded and migrant-led group and campaign Regularize. And Regularize seeks to improve the quality of life of the estimated 800,000 to 1.2 million undocumented migrants who are currently living in the United Kingdom by attaining them basic rights and a safer and more equitable path to settlement and citizenship. And Regularize would like the UK government to implement a regularization scheme for all migrants currently in the UK, regardless of status, and for undocumented migrants who have lived in the UK for at least 5 years to be settled permanently. This must include people who have overstayed their visas, people who have never applied for asylum or visas, asylum seekers with active applications, and those who had their asylum claims and other visas refused or rejected but have been living in the UK regardless of their status. Now you might be wondering whether this might be practically viable, but let's not forget that this wouldn't be too much of a deviation from what we've seen in the EU with the EU migrant settlement scheme, where certainly more than 1 million migrants have been granted settled or pre-settled status in the UK in a relatively short space of time. And regularizing undocumented migrants and migrants with insecure status will save lives and livelihoods. It is for this reason why it is important for us to be a signatory and a member of the Status Now network, and to support and amplify the Status Now for All initiative, Solidarity. As we've heard from those who have kindly shared their lived experiences of having insecure immigration status, the COVID-19 crisis has presented extra and unimaginable challenges for many people in this situation. Without assistance, many undocumented migrants are unable to provide for themselves and their families due to not being able to access any social or welfare support from the government. Many are struggling to meet even the most basic of human needs, food, shelter, and medicine. And this means that the risks of destitution and homelessness are very high, and that some migrants may even be forced to continue working in unsafe environments against the advice of the government. And let us also remember that there's an estimated 215,000 undocumented children, half who are said to have been born in the UK, who know the UK as their only home, who are currently in dire situations. And with many undocumented migrants, families, children living in or close to poverty, there's a very high risk of malnutrition, since many can hardly afford even the most basic food items. Undocumented migrants may also be at a higher risk of catching the SARS-CoV-2 virus due to overcrowded living conditions after years of restrictions to renting and working, which can make it impossible, as we've heard earlier, to self-isolate or even physically distance oneself. And this is why Status Now for all migrants and their families is important. This is why health and safety for all is important, as no one is safe until everyone is safe. We've heard this said many times, even by the World Health Organization. In May of this year, the Prime Minister Boris Johnson said, "We are in this together and together we will prevail." And in the same month, he also highlighted how he had hosted a summit to explore how to, in his own words, ensure that all children and adults are protected and supported during this challenging time. We are now in the month of July, and there still hasn't been a word or a reply to our call to action asking for status to be granted to all migrants and people from migrant families who are currently in the UK who have no leave to remain. We still have not heard anything about a regularization scheme for migrants without leave to remain so that they can access healthcare, housing, and other life-saving services currently denied to them. However, there is a clear solution to ensuring that everyone is protected and supported by granting Status Now for all. It is imperative that the UK government takes a positive step to regularize these migrants, as it will save the lives and livelihoods of many who are suffering right now and will continue to suffer if nothing is done. With the need to implement methods like contact tracing, which are only effective if there's a wider trust in the public to use them, it's important to ensure that everyone in society feels safe and confident within their communities when interacting with public bodies. These steps will also ensure that tools we have are effective in dealing and better managing any future contagion. And at the end of the day, this is an issue of reason, this is an issue of health, this is an issue of justice, this is an issue of the lives, livelihoods, and the well-being of everyone on these islands, as no one is safe until everyone is safe. So regularize now for status Regularize now for health and safety for all. Together we will prevail. Solidarity.
Thank you so much, Munya. Thank you. And thank you for reminding us that when there is a will, there is a way. Thank you so much. I would like now to invite, I'm delighted to have with us Ian Hudson from the Bakers, Food and Allied Workers Unions to tell us why the unions are supporting the campaign. Over to you, Ian.
Thank you very much. And obviously it's a pleasure to have listened to so many of the stories that we've heard today, because I think it's those stories that are critical if people are to understand why, you know, people should be given their rights and why, you know, we should all be treated as human beings, because it's only by hearing the realities of people's lives that we understand the need for action and for government to do its duty. And that's to protect, you know, people, because that's why politicians are elected into Parliament, and that's to make sure that it carries out the obligations and to serve the people. And I think it's very, very important that today here, with the launch of this, that we recognise how important it is to shine a light on the hostile environment that has become immigration. The lines that have been deliberately blurred between economic migrants, the refugees, asylum seekers and foreigners. The narrative of us and them, the negative headlines associated with what we read in the papers on a daily basis, such as illegal, swarm, tide or flood, to create the feeling of animosity that they're different. Because it is by this way that they are able to discriminate, to commit injustices against fellow human beings by dehumanising them, to deny basic rights to housing, healthcare, protection from harm, from assault. It's shameful, and it's our duty to stop this. And this is why we believe as a union, it's critical that trade unions are playing their part in ending and changing the narrative, to reaffirm our shared values, embrace our common humanity. We are all human and we are all entitled to human rights. We need to respond in our workplaces to the hate-filled media stories that often lead with words like crisis and threat, and explain the need of support and opportunity, of improving our communities by seeing them as our neighbour, in our workplace as our workmate, and when we go out as our friends. That is why this is our issue. It is through standing together that we will progress. It is our unity that leads to our prosperity, and it's our solidarity that leads to our victory. And that's our role as a trade union, to take that message into every workplace and into every trade union, to make sure we recognise it's only by standing together that human beings will all in the end win together. Solidarity from the Bakers, Food and Allied Workers Union.
Thank you so much, Ian. Thank you. Thank you. I'm trying to keep to the time, so I'd like us now to have another very short break and a small cultural activity. Voice of the Many was made specially for this launch event. Enjoy.
Emancipation. Like a snail, I find my way through the streets, trying to make sense of this city. Cold air sifts through my collar, and I tremble in my coat, thinking, how long am I going to last here? I open my heart to the city and to the people, trying to feel like I belong. But I don't understand why it matters so much where I am from. I have an answer, true and untrue. What country is mine? I have two and yet none, like a bird with two nests yet homeless. Waiting in a queue once, trying to find a home, I heard someone saying, these people, get rid of them. Just get rid of them. Like I wasn't there, invisible, a strange gap in the queue. When I am here, I think of my hometown. Although I never felt I belonged back then, a stranger in the same way I'm a foreigner here. But I've missed my family for days. The smell of naan in tandoor, the subtle perfume of wild roses when we pick them from Saharas. Now I hardly speak my first language and I will become a Mancunian in a few years. But still, stopped at the borders, scanned and searched. Will I miss this city if I leave someday? Will I miss saying, "Alright, our kid"? Will I miss hearing, "Good morning, lady"? This is exile, a strange existence, a journey from the self to the self. Someone dies in you, and a new one will be born.
Powerful words here. Now I would like to invite Dr. Ella Parry-Davis to tell us a little bit about the research report, A Chance to Feel Safe, Precarious Filipino Migrants Amidst UK Coronavirus Outbreak, which was published in June 2020, last month. Ella, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So I'm the author of this report, A Chance to Feel Safe, which was published just last month. Thank you so much for all the incredibly powerful things that we've heard today. This report was independently authored, but I think contributes some hard evidence to the claims that are being made by the organizations in the Status Now network. So over the last few months, I've heard from almost 80 Filipino precarious migrants in the UK, most of them without legal status. Though many of the issues they're facing are systemic, what's interesting about this group is that 9 in 10 of them have been doing frontline cleaning and care work for extremely low wages. Their responses detailed the ways in which the hostile environment had exacerbated the negative effects of COVID-19 on some of the most precarious individuals and communities in our society. Over half of the people that I heard from had lost all of their work and income and were on the brink of destitution. A very, very small, only 6% of them reported that the UK outbreak of coronavirus had not had any effect on their employment. These are people in no work, no pay conditions and are on the brink of destitution currently. They're also afraid of seeking healthcare. Of the 13 respondents that we heard from who had coronavirus symptoms, only one of those sought treatment. And they were very explicit that they'd be afraid to seek help because of the belief that they'd be reported or be charged prohibitive costs for treatment. They were also living in overcrowded and precarious transient accommodation. 1 in 5 of them were homeless. One had lived in a 4-bedroom flat with 13 other people who all had symptoms of coronavirus. Because they're forced to make the impossible choice between going to work and risking their health and falling into destitution with their families, they were saying things like what John says, quoted here, even if it's dangerous, even if it's risky for me, I have to go out and work to provide for my family. The report concludes that the hostile environments have forced precarious migrants into no work, no pay employment. They have deterred migrants from seeking healthcare. They've pushed migrants into temporary and overcrowded housing conditions that make it impossible for them to stay safe from the virus. And they've created constant fear and isolation, sometimes building up over years or even decades, that severs migrants and undocumented people from their support networks in a time when everybody is undergoing mental health difficulties and extra stress because of the virus. The government's support packages for citizens and people in the UK within the coronavirus outbreak are effectively meaningless for people in no work, no pay situations who can't access those financial safety nets. In the words of Fundix, we've survived almost 8 weeks now. We don't have any money from the government. We need help to survive. The hostile environment policies are, at this point in time, a danger to public health. They present people with the impossible choice of going to work and risking not only their health, but those of all the people around them, or otherwise falling into destitution. As was said by one of the other speakers today, nobody is safe until we are all safe. You can access the full report at Kanlungan's website. And as I said, I believe that it contributes hard evidence that supports the claims being made today for status now for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ella, for sharing this with us. Thank you. I think it's safe now to move to the question and answers. I know some of you submitted their questions. There's still time to submit more questions. So I think the first question is from Michael Bradley about how groups, organizations can help. Michael, do you want to ask your questions to the panelists? Over to you, please. Michael, are you with us? Are you still with us? Okay, I guess, oh yes, okay, I can see you. Can you, yeah?
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Okay, yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead, ask your question. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's been really impressive today, I think, and all the voices that people have heard about, you know, from the contributors and stuff so far. I'm work for one of the organisations that's supporting the initiative Stand Up to Racism. I suppose it'd be really good to hear if there are kind of initial things that you think would be useful for other groups or organisations or trade unions or other people to do to initially to help get the network, you know, support at a wider level. So that was my question.
Thank you, thank you. Susan, would you like to answer this question?
Yeah, okay, thanks, Nasek. I mean, I can share with you our kind of experience in organizing the undocumented workers among the Filipino community. We've been since before even COVID pandemic happened, we've been working and doing quite a lot of sharing and learning from each other among undocumented people. And at the height of the pandemic, it showed us how important it is for us to be organized and to be working together so that we can support each other. Because even among undocumented people, there's a lot of energy and there's a lot of willingness for them to support each other, despite the fact of their being also in a very powerless position. They found power by organizing each other, by supporting each other and learning a lot of the kind of issues around rights and ability to act. You know, the questions about, can we approach our MP? And this might be a really kind of basic question to ask. And then we learn from each other that it is possible to talk to your MPs, to approach your MPs. Can we talk to the councillors, to the mayor? It is possible for undocumented people to talk to councillors and mayors through the support of the many organizations are willing to be able to enable these discussions and this dialogue to happen so that they can be a powerful voice to these people who are policymakers who can make changes in the society by enabling from the different organizations like what you've said, so that they come together and they become a more and a stronger voice and a stronger community organization that we can. And we hope we will be able to organize really, and this is our dream. I know Lorraine, I've discussed this with Lorraine and a few other people in the network, to be able to organize a movement of undocumented people here in the UK so that they can face us and that people will be forced to face them and that we will not be afraid anymore, because we don't want to be afraid. We want to be able to conquer that fear so that we can show to the government that it is time now that they listen to us and that they make the changes that needs to happen. And hopefully that many MPs, including Conservative Party MPs, will be able to respond to this call and understand that we have a very skilled workforce which is being excluded from the country, and we should use those skilled workforce and harness and use them to be able to support the building and the rebuilding of the UK after the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you. And sorry, apology, I forgot to introduce you as Susan Cueva from Kanlungen. Thank you. We need to conquer the fear. We must conquer the fear. Ian, would you like to add anything to what Susan said?
I mean, obviously, you know, we've been trying to contact lots of trade unions, and I think, you know, obviously, if you're a member of a trade union, I think it'd be really useful if you can contact your regional officers, your executive, you know, even, you know, if you can write to your general secretary and tell them that, you know, this is a campaign that they should be supporting, because all trade unions should be supporting, you know, workers and people who find themselves, you know, in precarious positions, because it's in all of our interests, you know, from a health and safety perspective, from a community perspective, and from a human perspective, that trade unions are heavily supporting this campaign. And, you know, those would be one of the areas where we would ask if there are trade union members, or if you have friends that are trade union members, get inside your trade unions and make sure that your union is one of the voices that's representing this very, very important campaign that's currently looking for as many friends and supporters as we can.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you for this, Ian and Susan. I mean, we're getting many questions. They're all similar. I guess similar to the question just asked. Lots of people are asking, how can they help on a day-to-day? How can they offer help for undocumented migrants in terms of food, shelter, etc.? How do people help now? Maybe this is open to anyone from the panel to answer this question. If anyone feel like answer this question, please just raise your hand or wave at me. If not, I'll be inviting you.
I'll answer it.
Susan, go for it.
Go on, Lauren.
Yeah, I wanted to say, I think locally, you can reach out to the groups that are working with migrants and asylum seekers and refugees. So they should be able to tell you where the problem is. Like here in Coventry, I think at the beginning of the lockdown, what we did was we just started speaking in different local groups, and it's the same local groups, individuals that started donating money, which we are able now to help people who can't afford food.
Okay, great practical tip here for Susan.
Yeah, so we did exactly the same. We organized our different communities in different parts of London and also in the UK to be able to organize volunteers who can support the kind of basic food and basic medicines for people who are very vulnerable and people who are needing food. But I think the most important is also the issue about accommodation, because we have seen and we have really been struggling in finding accommodation for people who have been pushed out and homeless, because many of the workers that we're supporting were also sometimes live-in accommodation workers. So they were pushed out by the employer, dismissed, and therefore their accommodation also went from that because of that the situation that they fear that their workers will bring in virus into their homes. So accommodation is one very big thing. I mean, we did a lot of organizing around during the height of COVID, around delivering food also to our frontline workers in hospitals, in care homes. At the moment, we have a project actually in Claudia's constituency, because we're planning to deliver some food in some of the hospitals and care homes, because some of our members, the Filipinos, are in the hospitals and care homes. So we wanted to support them and just give them a moral boost, because I know Leicester is a little bit in a difficult situation at the moment. So we're doing that and targeting that area for now. But generally, we're also supporting other communities who are not able to organize themselves to produce basic food and medicines in the community. So do contact us. And I think what Lorraine said, there are a lot of organizations who are doing that. I mean, within Status Now, within our networking Status Now, we know of different organizations who are doing that. So you can email us and contact us wherever you are, and we can link you to those groups that we have.
Great, thank you, Susan, thank you. Okay, we're getting also a number of questions asking about holding the government to account, particularly after they have rolled back on various promises before granting amnesty. I don't like to call it amnesty, but this is what I'm getting, to those here for more than 10 years. Maybe, Claudia, this is a question maybe for you to answer if you can, but also other panelists are also welcome to answer. Claudia, would you like to answer that question or some of those questions? Thank you.
Let me unmute myself. The government's policies we know have been draconian. This is not a government that cares about people, doesn't care about humanity in any effect. They are going to be relentless on their issue, on the way that they apply their immigration policy. We see from the hostile environment their situation and position. We have pushed time and time again for them to relax the no recourse to public funds, and even that they're not willing to relent on. And it's only going to take the effort of all of us together, pushing hard to bring about the change that is necessary. We do need to demand that change, and that's why it's important that this campaign exists in a sense, to get civil society, unite the unions and everyone behind us and behind this campaign. We need to ensure, obviously, that the parliamentarians use every opportunity in Parliament to raise these questions in the House, to push and push and push. We've seen through this pandemic, it shone a light on particular situations, and nowhere more so than in my own constituency of Leicester East, where this open secret, as I've said before, of essentially largely women migrant workers are being exploited because they have nowhere else to turn. They're coming across these unscrupulous employers, unscrupulous bosses who are willing to exploit them, willing to hide their status in order to give them cash in hand, as little as £2 an hour. They're being exploited because they have nowhere else to go. And even those who've got a status of no recourse to public funds, they too are being exploited during this pandemic simply because they have, whilst they're able to work in a process of lockdown where that work cannot happen, they've got nothing else to fall back on than exploitative employers. So that's why it's important to call this situation out. Also, that it's important to join forces with other movements that are happening right now. Obviously, the Black Lives Matter movement is shining a light on the systemic and structural change that is needed in terms of state-sanctioned racism. So we need to join forces with movements like that as well, and all the movements that stand in opposition to racism too. So as we move forward and join together, I mean, if we were in a period of lockdown, I'm pretty sure we would all be together marching and ensuring that our voices are heard, because it's really important. I mean, in a sense, today's event, with all of the voices demonstrating very clearly why it's important to ensure that we protect all lives, not just those who are citizens of this country, but those who are undocumented. It's absolutely important that everybody is protected, and that's why this government needs to be held to account. We as parliamentarians need to constantly push this agenda. I'll be looking to work with a Status for All and all of the organisations that support it to look at what we do next in Parliament to step up this campaign even beyond the early day motion, because it's important that we constantly put the questions, we constantly raise our voices in the House, we constantly use every opportunity to ensure that our voices are heard, that we use and work with everyone that is wanting to fight for this cause. I'm so impressed by the organisations on the ground, the organisations that I've heard today, who are not only providing practical support for the here and now, but also looking to the future in terms of the strategies and structural changes that are needed as well, and the campaigns that we need to fight, because it's important to fight on both fronts, to recognise what people need to survive now, but also to recognise that we need to come out of this situation, to end it now and to move forward. And that can only happen if the voices of people that are sharing their experiences are heard, and we hear more and more of these testimonies. So I want to implore every organisation, including our union bodies, to give every opportunity for the testimonies, these personal testimonies to be heard, because only then, when these testimonies are heard, can people really look at their heart and see that change is absolutely necessary. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And it's absolutely right. Undocumented migrants are, leading this campaign, at the heart of this campaign, and leading this campaign. Thank you so much for all this encouragement. Thank you. I have also a question about the economic benefits of status now for everyone. Could this be a compelling argument for the government? Does anyone think? I mean, Monia, do you want to answer this question, maybe? Can you unmute yourself first? Oh.
Hello. Yes, I mean, the economic argument would be one of the arguments to give, along with the humanitarian one, with the social benefits, as well as the public health benefits. When we look simply at the economic argument, when Boris Johnson was Mayor of London, actually, he commissioned a report in 2007 that looked at the economic benefits of regularizing undocumented migrants. And it seemed to argue for this regularization then. We don't believe that much would have changed until then. But to look at the economic costs of operating immigration enforcement in the UK, this is a very expensive scheme to try and forcibly remove people or find people even. Considering there are estimated 800,000 to 1.2 million undocumented migrants in the UK. Some of the costs of forcibly removing or deporting someone, for example, can be upwards of £7,000 to £10,000 per person to charter these flights. Now, just multiply that by 1.2 million people. That would probably cost £10 billion. And to even find this many people would probably take, some estimates range to 100 years, of which obviously the number of people would grow by then. So it is quite impractical to have an enforcement scheme that is trying to find any of the 800,000 to 1.2 million people, because it's simply impossible and it's extremely costly and it's a waste of taxpayers' money. Whereas if you bring people into the economy, into the lawful economy, and people are able to contribute by paying taxes, this could, some of the estimates look at it bringing upwards of £1 billion per year. This will be in the first year. Now imagine after 10 years already, that's £10 billion to the tax pot. That could go to the NHS, that could go to building houses, that could go to maintaining roads and maintaining schools, because people are already here, people are already working. And it's unlikely that any of the people, or many of them, are going to go at the rate of deportations of 7,000 per year. I don't know if that answers the question.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Munia. I mean, Diane, would you like to add anything to what Munia have said?
I would like to add just about the role of lived experience. I think all of us today have been really moved that people who are experiencing the inhuman nature and the indignity of being undocumented have been able to speak and to really lead the conversation. there's an organization called the Apple Collective that RAPAR and ATD Fourth World are part of that not only puts forward, Apple is addressing poverty with lived experience. And so not only puts forward those voices, but really offers a place where people with a common lived experience can forge their thinking and their strategy for working together. And that's a very important thing as well. People who have a lived experience have something to say about their personal experience and also have collective thinking to bring us, and that will lead all of society forward.
Thank you. Anyone else from the panelists would like to add to this, answer this question, or to add anything? No? Okay. Wonderful. Okay, well, it looks like, okay, so the next question, maybe the final one. So we have a number of questions, people asking what's next, what happened after the EDM. I don't know who would like to answer this question. I mean, Susan, maybe would you like to answer this question? Oh, please, other panelists, just wave and if you like to answer that question.
Yeah, but I mean, actually, would like to ask Claudia how the EDM mechanics works really, because we know it's in the EDM. What we wanted to ask is whether there is going to be, or whether it's possible to debate it in Parliament, the regularization issue, or whether it's possible to put a question to the Prime Minister on this issue. I mean, is that something that happens after or during the EDM? Or there? Is she gone? Did Claudia got cut off?
We might have lost Claudia. We might have lost her.
Okay.
Can I just say something then, because we've been responding to that question backstage, as it were?
Yes, please.
And just saying that as far as we know with the EDM, if we are able to secure signatories that cross the different political perspectives, including even a couple of Tory MPs. Oh, Claudia's back. I'll be quiet. Claudia, over to you.
Claudia.
Sorry. Okay, thanks. Hi. Sorry, I've just got logged out and logged back in. Sorry, you'll have to tell me. I've just literally just managed to get back in.
Rita, would you like to repeat your point, please? As Claudia missed.
Yes. It's the question, Claudia, that was coming about next steps on the EDM. And I was just beginning to say that our understanding is that if MPs from across the House back the EDM, then it's more likely that there will be a time for the debate. Is that, and I might be wrong there, you know more.
Well, I think there are other things that we obviously need to do that then follows the EDM. For example, we need to be able to perhaps present a petition. We need to get more people speaking up in Parliament about it, but we need to organise as to how we're going to use the parliamentary process, absolutely, to raise this issue. We know that we're up against it in terms of a stubborn government, and obviously we have a Home Secretary that is obviously totally wants to slam down on the issue of immigration. But I think we've got to keep pushing, we've got to energize ourselves. So I'm hoping that from this we will have if you like, a strategy meeting or organized meeting with the unions and with status for now, so that we can organize how we do our next steps, having been informed by the voices and testimonies that we've heard today, because it's absolutely clear what the situation is. So we do need to get as many people on board as possible. At the moment, we, as indicated at the beginning, we've got about 40 MPs or so that have signed the EDM. We've got about 650 members of parliament, so we need to get more members of parliament signing this EDM. So we do need to put the pressure on and run an online, social media and everything campaign to throw at this. And just like other areas of society where we've seen kind of like the government's or rather injustice appear. I mean, we only have to look at what's happening to BA workers and so on. Their campaigns to get members of parliament to speak up about the issue. We need to run similar campaigns, and we can do with the united support of our unions, with everyone in civil society, with the great work that's already happening with grassroots organizations that I've heard today. So, you know, we can pull all of this together and put more pressure in Parliament. And I look forward to continuing to push this agenda with you in Parliament, so that the voices and the testimonies that we are hearing today can be heard. No one should have to live in these unfair conditions. No one should have to be so frightened that they cannot be treated health-wise. And so we've got to push this home, because we've got to protect everyone, and that really does have to include everyone, and that requires all of us and all of our efforts with all of the organizations that there is around on these issues.
Thank you so much, Claudia. I guess we are nearing the end of our program. Before I end and introduce the final session, final cultural activity, which will be led by Lorraine, and she'll be reading one of her poems, I would like to, first of all, thank everyone, thank all the panelists, all the speakers, all the people who attended today's launch event, and those who submitted questions or engaged in conversation on chat. Thank you all for contributing to this successful launch event, for joining us for this very important event and very important campaign indeed. Do join us. There is a website, all the information is there. But also my hard job as a chair is, before I pass you to Lorraine to end the day on a beautiful poem, just to summarize, to try to summarize this session, what people said, the essence of what people said at this event. And I'm not creating my own words, I've taken them from the speakers themselves. So for my summary is that we all know that there are over 1 million people in the UK who are living without access to support in these difficult times. And what we need to do is very clear. We need to end the hostile environment. We need to end detention, and we need to grant status to all. Why? Because we are all human and we all have human rights. And why we need to work together, of course, and to have the voices of those with lived experience, lead in the campaign, at the heart of the campaign, because solidarity leads to victory. I'll end it here and say thank you very much again, and have a nice weekend. And it's over to you, Lorraine, to conclude the day with the final cultural activity with one of your poems. Over to you, Lorraine. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I also would like to extend thanks to people who are carrying the burden of supporting those of us who do not have any rights to work or benefit in this country. We also ask that everybody here continues to reach out to their own networks to grow the support that we need, and to approach their MPs to join the early day motion, call for status now. This is the beginning of the network that will only end when we have status now for all. Hopefully that will come soon, but for however long it takes, we will work together to make it happen, and we will never give up. Many of my brothers and sisters who are British tell me one thing: we not only want you here, we not only want people like you, we need people like you. As I close our launch today, I offer you a fundamental public health and social truth. It has been echoed by many of the speakers today. To be safe and well, we all need each other. Thank you. So the final one thing is we have a short video about 2.5 minutes. It's part of the poem which I wrote, and it's entitled God, I Love My Son. God, I Love My Son was first read as part of the Refugee Week 2020 under the theme, Imagine My Reality. It was produced by Laura Nyahuye of Maoko Arts. God, I Love My Son is conveying the tension and challenges that asylum seekers, refugees, and migrants face due to separation from our children. While dealing with the rights to remain, homelessness, and lately the pandemic, there is the issue of our children who are separated from us. But after the video, there will just be a small moment, like about 30 minutes, before we end the meeting to gather our thoughts about what we have heard this evening. So we'll ask you, if you can, to stay quiet for 30 seconds, sorry, not 30 minutes, 30 seconds at the end of the video, then the meeting will end. Thank you very much indeed for everyone being here. And here's my poem, God, I Love My Son.
God, I love my son. Vachuta, I love my son is a protest to show that whatever barriers that have been mounted between us, my heart is always with him. God, I love my son is a status that comes from the deepest part of my heart. I know I have failed him, but it stands. God, I love my son. Bachiuta, mwana wani kumtemwa.
So boma ndilikuyenera kuti lione kanthu kuti vanthu ovwirike. Vanthu ava kuti imungagwira ntchito cha vanthu ankhongono zawo chifukwa uli. So peni papa ndipinkhona ngati pali shushu. Ine mashushu kanyakha yankho yawona ngakuti nchifukwa cha vichipatu tuchita ntchito ngati izo timkovwirana mwekha njana liji chakulya timupe njana liji ndalama ya foni tisonkhe ndalama titipure boma luvitola ivi ngani vinthu vambula ntchito mumtima wawo khabo kanakana kuti vanthu vanyakhe ambafumira mcharo ichi cha mbanthu yayi ine vikunizizika para vangazomereja kwaka kuti vanthu avagwire ntchito mbwexuxu paliji vanthu ava mbalwali para vangazomereja vakwenera kuti vanthu vapokere chovwiro katos tili vanthu, we are all human, we feel the pain.
That's it for today. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Are we still, yeah. Are we anywhere live? Have we gone, Sheila?
We've gone. Just
Oh.
the live stream. We still have some attendees
Well done
in the
us.
room.
Jesus Christ, we did it.
We still have some attendees in the room, people.